What's that? Yeah.
And they built it anyhow.
Well,
Awesome.
that's where I got a little problem.
Yeah.
Kind of wave of shame, you know.
Yeah, well, we'll get a variance.
The September 24th meeting of the City Planning Commission is now in order. Please call the roll.
Barch,
Here.
Burning, Bollinger,
Yes.
Demakis,
Here.
Hanson,
Yes.
Hochhalter.
Here.
Keller,
Here.
Coop, Lartius, Offerdahl,
Here.
Siebertson,
Here.
Wagenast,
Here.
Wetzler.
Here.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, I will look for a motion from the Planning Commissioners for approval of the August 27th minutes of the regular meeting.
So moved. Second.
So it's a motion by Keller and a second by Wagenist. Please call the roll.
Coop, I'm sorry, Offerdahl,
Here. Yes.
Sievertson,
Yes.
Wagenast,
Yes.
Wetzler.
Yes.
Barch,
Yes.
Bollinger,
Yes.
Demakis,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Hochhalter,
Yes.
and Keller.
Yes.
Motion passes. That'll bring us to our first agenda item of the evening, which is a public hearing request by Richard D. Johnson to straighten interior lot between two lots. Subdivision by plat, this property is located at 720 12th Street Northeast and 1200 8th Avenue Northeast. If I could have city staff's report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is what I call really a housekeeping issue between these two owners. They have an interior lot line they'd like to adjust. This is a vicinity map. Shows the property at the corner of 12th Street and 8th Avenue Northeast. An aerial view of the properties. You can see the white lines that represent the interior lot line are askew. They don't line up. And about halfway through the property, east and west, there's a 5-foot jog in the property line. And I'll blow it up one more time and show you here. The white line represents the existing property line. And so the north house actually owns that 5-foot strip, but in actuality, the south house is using it with the way there's a retaining wall there, I believe, and whatnot. And so what they'd like to do is just straighten that line out across there and get rid of that 5-foot bust, which I don't really know why it's there. So here's the plat that's been prepared. You can see that 5-foot anomaly there and the line straightened out. Pretty straightforward stuff. Findings of fact, they want to straighten the lot line and they submitted a subdivision plat, the two neighbors have. And so staff recommends approval of this 2-lot subdivision to be known as Belmont Second Edition Lots 1 and 2. I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Commissioners, any questions for the principal planner? At this time, I'll ask if there's anybody in the audience in favor of this agenda item that would like to speak to come forward now. Please come forward and make sure to please sign in. There should be a sign-up sheet there with your name and address.
I am the property owner, Richard Johnson, and everybody that I've talked to has nothing against this.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Commissioners, any questions of Mr. Johnson? Okay, thank you. At this time, anyone opposed to this agenda item, please come forward. Either for or against. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and bring it to the commissioners for a motion, please.
Move to approve.
Second.
I got a motion by Demakis and a second by Offerdahl. Any further discussion? Okay, please call the roll.
Hanson,
Yes.
Hochhalter,
Yes.
Keller,
Yes.
Siebertson,
Yes.
Wagenast.
Yes.
Wetzler,
Yes.
Bartsch,
Yes.
Bullinger,
Yes.
and Demakus.
Yes. I think you forgot Offerdahl.
Yes.
Oh, my apologies, Mr. Offerdahl.
That's right.
Motion carries. All right. That'll bring us to our second agenda item of the evening, which is a public hearing on a request by Souris Basin Transportation, represented by Daryl Francis, for a variance on Kemper Addition Lot 1 to allow an existing building to be enlarged over 75% of its original size in M1, a light industrial district, and this property is located at 805 31st Street Southeast in Minot. If I could get city staff's comments, please.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to add a little bit to that preamble. It's not only a variance to allow an existing building to be enlarged over 75%, but also the request is not to have to meet the architectural design and building construction materials requirements that are set forth in M1 for an addition of that size. So here's a vicinity map. You can see the site is located along East Burdick Expressway, a little bit east of the fairgrounds at 31st Street Southeast. The city Public Works shop and annex, bus annex is directly south of the site. So it's at a visible location. This is an aerial view of the site. And for a little back history here, the Souris Basin Transportation Group owned two buildings. This one was actually built during the flood. And there's another one at 309 First Avenue Northeast that was affected by the flood, and the city has purchased it because it's in the path of flood protection. I think a levee or something has to be built there. And so they had to make a business decision of what to do with to make up for that lost building space. And so instead of building a new building, they made a decision to do an enlargement here at their other facility at 805 31st Street. I'm going to skip forward a couple slides here. So there's a couple of different scenarios they're looking at for their bid. One is their base bid and another one's an alternate. One's a little bigger than the other. As you can see, the orange lines show roughly the outline of the addition to the building. And in the M1 zone, as I alluded to earlier, there is a section in order to kind of avoid having metal buildings with no extra detail to them. There's a section of the code that requires that the applicant or the designer choose between some different choices for architectural enhancements, things like the roof line enhancements, or adding horizontal and vertical elements, or contrasting and complementing colors, or doing some enhancements around the front door, around the entryway with a portico or vestibule. And so there's like 7 things, I think, and at least 2 have to be met. Then there's also, in addition to that, some building construction, building materials requirements, and there's a list of building materials of which at least 2 have to be met. And that would be brick, stone, split face block, glass block, wood, EPIS or stucco, those kinds of things, so that we don't have a totally metal building. And in this case, the applicants would like to put up a metal building. This is elevations of it, metal panel with a standing seam metal roof. And what the code says is based on the size of the addition, 0 to 25%, there's no compliance required. 25 to 50, there's some compliance. When you get up to this level, the addition and the existing building are supposed to meet the code requirements, and they're asking for relief from that as a variance. And the city staff, it's difficult to identify a variance. Variances are not supposed to be based on monetary reasons. And they did, I know, at least I know the chairman got an email, I assume the rest of you did today, with a bunch of numbers about how their rates are set up and the amount of money that some of this stuff is costing and that kind of thing, claiming that that would be a hardship. And again, typically the hardships aren't monetary based, they're not convenience based. They're supposed to be a pre-existing situation that can be avoided on the site. So I'll go back real quick and just show the zoning. it is zoned M1, and there's M1 on both sides of it. There's M1 across the street, and then public zoning to the south where the city property is. A little bit of R1 and some C2 down the highway. So there is a kind of a mixture of uses and zoning in the area. It is at a prominent location, I would say. 31st carries a surprising amount of traffic, even though it doesn't go very far to the south because of the bus barn and the city facilities that are there. There's a VFW club. And of course, the expressway verdict carries quite a bit of traffic. So I think it's important that the appearance of the building be kept up and met what is required in the codes. And the last slide is really the landscape slide here. I want to make it clear that the landscaping in industrial zones is pretty sparse or not overwhelming. And what they're proposing would meet the code. But when I looked at this, I saw that they're taking out 24 out of 41 trees and not replacing them. So they are in compliance. But to me, to ask to not do any of the architectural upgrades to the building that are required and also remove the landscaping, I guess, how sparse do we want the site to be when it's right at the location of this intersection of the street? So again, I want to be clear, they're not violating the landscape ordinance, but the trees, I think, help make the site nice, and a lot of them are small. It seems to me like they could be tree spaded pretty easily. So, findings of fact, they lost their building, they needed new ones. In 2013, the materials for design went in the code, and they're asking for relief from that. The section requires enhanced architectural elements. I should say, I didn't mention, it's only for street-facing facades, so it would be facing 31st and facing Burdick and wrapping 10 feet around the corners. And they've applied for a variance seeking relief from those requirements. Staff recommending denial of variance because we can't find a lack of demonstrable hardship. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for the planner? Not this time. All right. At this time, I'll ask that anyone in attendance that would like to come forward and speak in favor of this agenda item, please come forward. And again, if we ask you to please sign in when you get up here, thank you.
My name is Daryl Francis. I'm the Executive Director for Service Basin Transportation. I've been doing this for 30-some years. I represented the city of Minot on the board of directors of Service Basin, and then I retired from the city and became director for Service Basin. The reason we're requesting this is because I think it's totally unfair. I think you're looking at those trees, those short trees, those are the ones we planted ourselves 3 years ago, and we built the building back in 2011. So we added more trees. And granted, they're short, but that's basically due to the fact that we built on a gravel pit. That's what it is. It's all gravel. So those trees are going to basically come out because we want to level that playing field to the south of our building. We bought this property from MADC when they first came out with that plat. And this was the first lot that was sold. And we bought that so we can use ARRA money from the federal government in 2010 to build this building. And there was 5 other buildings built throughout North Dakota as well, and we were fortunately one of them to build a transit center. We provide rides for about 90,000 rides for 10 counties. And every one of those counties, we bring rides to Minot every week, almost every day. And what we're asking for is a variance based on the fact that this is a hardship. We didn't do the flood. We put $175,000 in that old building behind the icebox to get back into that building. We got our regional training room in there. We got our maintenance facility for our buses. We got storage for our buses, so half are there, half at the new building. And we're full at the new building. So for us to bring the other ones in, to ask a variance in regards to a hardship, well, the hardship is going to be not only on us in regards to the money that we lost in a building that we got $630,000 for it, and we put $175,000, no insurance, into it, fixed it up. Very nice building. But due to the flood protection dikes, they're going to, that's borderline. Looks like it's going to come out. So we signed the agreement with CDM. What happened here was it took them 10 months to give us an appraisal. 10 months. So that put us into January of this year. It took us 2 months to get federal approval from the federal government and the state DOT, because that's the other grantee to our agency. And so we had to go in and find an engineering firm, do a design, and then we just opened bids last week. The bids are about $2.1 million. The building that we built the first time only cost us $1.03 million during the flood. What the reason is, basically, we want to continue the roof line. We thought that would be better looking than putting a jaunt into it, because I just think a continuation of the roof line itself would make it more effective. The trees, I'm not worried about that. I mean, once we get some better footing in there, we'll put trees back in. I mean, I don't have any problem with that. But what was in there prior was required as by the city plan. But those other 16 trees, the small ones that are coming out, will have to come out so we can level the playing field, basically. We built this building on that corner of that lot because we also have an agreement with the city of Minot for fuel. That's where we get our fuel. We got 12 routes in the city of Minot. We got another 10 routes outside the city of Minot. And for us, it's very accessible. It's ideal. Traffic-wise, only time there's heavy traffic is at 4:30. Everybody's leaving the city shop. So that's my concern. I just think I think it would look better with what we had planned than try to make half of it look, 3-foot brick in the front, change colors, change the slope, we're going to go with the same siding and with the same roof line. It's a continuation of the building. And we lost, 9,000 square feet from the old building, so we want to at least recoup that. But at the same time, we found out to add another 3,000 square feet only costs us $300,000. So that may only make sense. We're looking to the future here. If the city's for economic development and expanding, how many other public transits do you have in the city of Minot that runs after 7 o'clock? You have none. That's our system. We run on the weekends. It's a public transit, and we do door to door. So I'm saying it's an economic chaos for those who use our service if we can't expand, if we can't go forward this. We're a nonprofit. And so the money that we got is either federal, state, or county. And that's the money that we've been using for this development. So granted, you probably think it's not a hardship. Wait a minute, guys, I didn't let it rain. I didn't let it flood. And I think it's wrong that we put all this money into our system, our services, and then all of a sudden, no, because the planning changed in 2013 that we cannot make it adaptable to what we have. I don't think it's not going to look it's going to look just as good as anybody else's. And I just think being there is just an ideal situation. And so I really hope you guys reconsider and vote for the variance so we can move forward, because CDM has given us the look. I think by spring of next summer, we have to be out of there, and I don't know if we will be. And for us to go buy another facility, no, there wasn't one in town that was comparable. And why would I want to build, we built this with an expandable joint on the south end, so we can add to the south. We placed it on the property, so we can go to the south. That property was made to have a bigger building on it, and that's why we bought it. But we couldn't afford it at the time we started in 2011. Now we have to, and we've been trying to get the funding for it. And for that, I think we really like to have the variance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Francis. Planning Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Francis at this time?
I have one question. In your bid, did you have alternates for the materials to meet the ordinance?
Yes.
And what were those totals for that?
That was about $45,000 for the 25-foot edition, about $50,000 for the 50-foot edition.
Okay.
But I also look at that too, the north end, you know, we have the 1, 2, 3, 4 bay doors. So there's 2 feet between them. And then to add the fifth door, add on to the 40 feet. So you're looking at 12-foot doors. So we had 20 feet that we would have to put something on it. The other entrance, we do have a glass. We do have, I think we meet enough of the entrance the way it is. Now, we would add a small entrance for the training room, and that's the plans.
So in the overall budget of the building, you're looking at $2.1 million addition. $45,000 or $50,000 isn't much of that budget, just to meet the ordinance, which everyone else doing construction projects in the town are required to meet.
It's up to you guys. I myself, we're cutting back on field addendums because we don't have enough money. So hardship-wise, granted, it's on our bank account. I mean, it's our ballpark. I mean, that's the money we have to come up with just so we can add some rock or change the vertical to horizontal. I mean, I just think that's, I'm asking for a variance, so we don't have to do that.
Any other questions at this time?
Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
Mr. Francis, there were 2 sketches that we were shown, overheads, that were drawn in our map.
Yes.
It was on the orange line. And so there are 2 different size buildings that were proposed. What was the difference in price of those 2 buildings, do you know? I think it's up there right now.
It was almost $400,000.
So which one are you going to build?
I want to do the big one because that just adds, you know, the L shape is the same on the top part. That's the east side. But it changes on the south end because that one, bottom one is 25 feet, top one is 50 feet. So I really like to go to the 50 because, like I said, it's a one-time deal. It's not going to be redone because of the situation in regards where, you know, we won't be able to do the parking lots this time because of the cost. So that's the reasoning behind that.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
If you went to the diagram on the lower part of the page there,
Right.
You'd have a savings of $400,000. Would it be $400,000 less?
Right. Just about.
Kind of cover your cost of facing the building then.
Not if we don't have 1.9 million to begin with. I mean, we just got the bids in. So we're looking at, you know, the grants that are available and so forth. So it's one or the other, I guess.
Any other questions for Mr. Francis at this time, Commissioners? Okay, if you just want to hang around, we might have some more questions for you.
Thank you for your time, guys. Gals.
Thank you. At this time, is there anyone else in the audience in attendance that would like to come speak in favor of this agenda item? Or opposed to this agenda item? Okay, at this time, I will close the public hearing portion of that, and I will look to the commissioners for a motion, please.
Make a motion to deny the variance based on the cost of the meeting the variance not being a large portion of this overall budget for the project. It doesn't seem to throw it one way or the other when you're looking at a $2 million budget for the project. And with everyone else developing in town following our ordinances and spending the money, it just doesn't seem fair that we let one person not do it and not consider everyone else to do the same.
So it's a motion to deny from Keller. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Barch. Any further discussion? Taking none, please call the roll.
Offerdahl,
Yes.
Severson,
Yes.
Wagonass,
Abstain.
Wetzler,
Yes.
Bollinger,
Abstain.
Demakis,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
and Hochhalter.
Yes.
Keller was no.
Keller was, you made the motion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Did you vote?
Keller, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Motion passes. Motion die. Okay. Our next agenda item is a public hearing on request from Northdale Villa Condominiums. The request states an ordinance change made existing condominium use non-conforming, creating lender and insurance issues in the event of partial destruction. The ordinance would prohibit rebuilding. So that is a proposed zone change from C2 to RM, and this address, the address of this property is 2717 to 2835 North Broadway. If I could get city staff's comments, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So here's a vicinity map. This is located on North Broadway, just north of Jerome's Collision Center, a little bit north of 27th Avenue Northwest. And I don't even remember how this came about to begin with, but I got in discussions with one of the members of the board of the condos, and back in 2013, I believe, is when it happened. At some point, anyway, the council made a conscious decision to not allow residential use in commercial zoning anymore, and there is quite a bit of that around town, and so those properties became non-conforming. There's single-family houses, there's apartments, there's condos, there's different things. But the caveat to that is the non-conforming or grandfathered use is that if something were to happen to those properties, if there was a fire, for example, then to an extent of 60% damage or greater, they would not be able to rebuild as residential. The property would have to be used for a commercial purpose, and that caused some concern for the board. And there's, I think, 20 different owners involved in this, and so it took some time to get signatures from all the owners. But they all agreed at the board meetings and whatnot it would be a good thing to take care of this now, instead of having to try to zone it if there was some problem in the future, and to have it set up so that the use matches the zoning. And here's the enlarged area of the facility here, 20-unit condos. Here's the zoning at C2. You can see there's a strip of commercial along the highway, and directly behind it is R3, which is now a defunct zone, but it's comparable to our RM zone, which is medium density residential, and that's what we're proposing to zone this to is RM. And then the future land use map shows it as being commercial, and staff considered changing this, but I think because of the frontage on the highway, it makes sense to keep it commercial. Ultimately, it'll be years and years and years down the road, but if this were to be replaced with some other type of development, it would likely be commercial, I would think. But in the meantime, we're rezoning it to the RM zone. So the subject became non-conforming, and the applicant, the owners, decided they would like to pursue rezoning at this time from C2 to RM. They've applied for that rezoning, and staff recommends approval of the rezoning from C2 to RM, which is medium-density residential. I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Commissioners, any questions for the principal planner?
I have a question.
Yes.
Will the rezoning, will that add land to the west of the property line so it's contiguous with the other commercial, the other residential property?
It's not going to add any land.
Well, but it looks like right now that it's not contiguous.
And, well, I don't know for sure the answer to that. Norris, is there a, I know there was an alley, a kind of an alleyway that maybe that you negotiated with Lundin's?
Yes.
Is that, so is that what, is there a strip of land through there?
There's about a 20-foot strip at the back.
Okay. So it doesn't go all the way over to the west property?
Just a question.
Commissioners, any questions for the principal planner? Okay, at this time, anyone in the audience that would like to speak in favor of this agenda item to come forward and please sign in and let us know who you are.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Mr. Lang, Director.
Norris, could I have you check and see right on the bottom of the microphone where it attaches to the podium if that is lit up? There's a button there.
There, now it's
There we go.
lit up.
Thank you.
Now I can talk?
You're good now. Thank you.
Or at least you can hear me?
Right on.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, committee members, Lance Lang, Director. I'm Norris Abrahamson. I'm on the board of directors at the Condo Association. We bought in there in 2014. First off, I want to thank Lance Lang for all his help in putting this together to this point. Now I ask on behalf of the association, you taking care of a problem we had and didn't even know about it until talking to bankers and insurance people, where we found out a bad storm and we had in excess of 60% damage we would not be able to rebuild. 2 years ago, contacted city commissioners, at least 2 years, maybe 2.5 years ago. I've been working on this forever. Contacted former city commissioners and planning and zoning director. We were told, I guess he got screwed. And I guess we did. That's really nice. I tell you, it really enlightens you when you go to people that are at the head of this thing and say, I guess you got screwed. We've been working on this for 2 years or more. And at this time, I ask and expect your consideration and unanimous approval. Any questions? I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Commissioners, any question for Mr. Abrahamson at this time? Okay, thank you, Norris. We'll call you back up if we do have a question that
Thank
comes
you.
up.
Appreciate your help.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else in attendance right now that would like to come forward and speak in favor of this agenda item? Anyone that is opposed to this agenda item to please come forward now. Seeing none, I will close the public portion and ask commissioners for a motion, please.
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion to approve from Hochholter and second from Demakis.
Wagonist, I believe.
Oh, Wagonus, sorry. Any discussion? Okay, please call the roll.
Keller,
Yes.
Offerdahl,
Yes.
Severson,
Yes.
Wagonest,
Yes.
Wetzler,
Yes.
Barch,
Yes.
Bullinger,
Yes.
Demakis,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Hochhalter.
Yes.
Motion carries. Next agenda item is a public hearing on request by Dr. Nordell for a variance on Southdale 8th Edition Lot 14 for a new deck within the 10-foot setback. This property is located at 1825 Tammy Drive, Southwest. If I could have city staff's recommendation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wrong one, hold on. had it reversed in my slides, I apologize.
Okay, you got it there.
All right, so here's a vicinity map. This is located on a residential cul-de-sac, Tammy Drive, north of 19th Avenue and south of 18th Avenue, down in that area. This is a aerial view of the property, and you'll see the house has a deck on the backside, and this is another variance request that it's very hard for staff to come up with a justifiable hardship. The deck that you see, the existing deck, is only 3.5 feet from the property line, and a new deck was considered that would be a little bit more in compliance with the setbacks. The situation here is in R1 zoning, there's a 20-foot rear yard required, but recognizing the importance of decks and outdoor entertaining, I guess that the code allows for a 10-foot encroachment into that 20 feet, but this deck goes all the way to within 3 feet of the 3.5 feet, and the new deck that's proposed goes up to within 6 feet. So it's a little bit better situation, but it's still 4 feet into the area that it's not supposed to be. So basically, it's a request for a 4-foot variance. And the reason why this is hard to find a hardship for is that when the builder came in to meet with, or to ask for a permit, to apply for a building permit, it was not issued because of this, because of these dimensions, and he was made aware that either the deck had to be reduced in size, or perhaps he could come before this board for a variance, and so here we are today. But it's my understanding that the deck's been constructed already, or at least the majority of it has. And so we really can't claim a hardship the fact that it's already up because it was a known issue, and the building permit wasn't issued, and the deck was built without a building permit. So at the end of the day, is it a huge concern to the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Minot that this deck is too close to the property line? No. Is it going to cause a terrible situation for the neighborhood? No. But from a staff standpoint, we have to be able to have some kind of hardship in order to support a variance. And the fact that the way this happened, I don't see where there's any hardship that we can support. It can't be based on monetary, can't be based on convenience, can't be based on self-imposed, like just because the other deck was there and it was too close. Well, now we're making it a little better, even though we're still not in compliance. Well, it's still not in compliance. So basically, that's the situation. This diagram here shows in pink the existing deck that was 3.5 feet, and the new deck in yellow, which is actually a little wider, and it's pulled back a little bit more from the fence, but still encroaching 4 feet. So findings of fact, the contractor wasn't issued the permit and proceeded anyway, and is seeking relief. In the application, there wasn't really any justification from the contractor as to why this needed to be the size it was, other than the fact that they were rebuilding the deck and it's better than the old one. It doesn't encroach as much, but it still is an encroachment. So staff's going to recommend denial of this variance because of no demonstrable hardship. The deck was constructed without a valid building permit when the applicant was aware that the setback issue needed to be addressed. So I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have on this.
Thank you, Principal Planner. Commissioners, any questions for the city staff? Seeing none, at this time I'll look to the audience. Anyone in favor of this agenda item to please come forward. Again, if you could please just sign in and let us know who you are. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Jay Height with Height Construction. There's kind of a little bit of a unique story behind this, probably with every variance, but I was contacted by Dr. Nordell to see if I could help her with this deck project. She had previously had another contractor look at the project, and that contractor decided to take it on. However, he removed the existing deck, and due to some family reasons, he was unable to complete the project or actually move forward with it. So as a good contractor would do, I went to the city and with the plans that we had and applied for a building permit. Had a discussion with Mitch, the building official, and he said that, you know, it encroached, you can only have 10 feet from the property line. So we encroached, you know, by 4 feet. I asked him, I said, what's the likelihood? I said, our schedule's tight. We need to get concrete in. I need to help Dr. Nordell now. I'm not gonna have time to wait with the process. I said, I know there's a risk if we move forward that it could potentially be denied. He said, yeah, if it's real controversial and if you have a lot of opposition, it could be denied. He said, past experiences with this and myself as a contractor, being in the industry for 25 years, I think it's calculated risk if people were notified like you do, and if there was no opposition. In fact, I can present the letter from the neighbor in the backyard that wrote this on behalf of Dr. Nordell, saying that there's no problem with the deck being closer to the property line. So basically, we'd be asking for a 4-foot variance. I also took pictures. I also told Mitch that I would move forward with it, and he said, well, you can do that. I can't stop you. I took pictures of the footings that we did, the frame. All we did is frame the structure. And so we documented everything, and he has pictures of that and documentation of that. And I didn't take it any farther than that because I felt like I didn't want to take it too far just in case there was, you know, we had to make it smaller. So we limited to what we did do, but we got the groundwork done, the landscaping's done, and basically the structure's up. So with that, the house was built in 1978. That was the original deck that was on there. My understanding that the deck is about 20 inches off the ground. If she poured a concrete patio, she could pour it all the way up to the property line. So, you know, it's one of the things. But I'd like to just kind of approach your.
Please. Thank you, Mr. Wright.
So obviously, would like to get approval. I guess the hardship is that, you know, I guess if you had a deck that was 18 feet wide and now you're only going to have it 14 feet wide, a 10-foot wide deck is all she could really have, and you know, a 10-foot wide deck isn't much. Nobody's going to see it. I don't think the neighbor behind has a problem with it, so. I guess that's all I have.
Okay, thanks. If you want to just hang around in case there's a question here. Commissioners, any question for Mr. Height? Jay, I have one. Like, with the deck now, you're saying that it's, in order to be in compliance, it's going to be 10 feet wide, approximately.
Correct. Yeah. It's going to end up being 14 feet. Right. If it passes, but otherwise it could only be 10 foot.
Okay, and is that any problem, I mean, other than she wants it 14 feet wide, with the way you've constructed it, that it can be built 10 feet wide?
Yeah, I mean, I guess obviously it's possible to do that.
Yep.
But, yep, I guess if Margaret wants to, can Margaret
please come forward. Okay. Yep.
The way the house is built, the backyard, I have these beautiful French doors that the Watneys built, was Claire and Darlene, and had the beautiful, you know, back deck with hanging baskets and flowers, and those beautiful, you know, French doors just look out that's all they do to that deck. And so to have that, you know, just like this, I mean, we're just claustrophobic, you know, just absolutely, I'd sit in my living room and just be claustrophobic. And Claire and Sheila and Larry, they've been there for the year. I've been in that house for 20-some years, but the deck was just rotting, you know. So, and their house was way, way back from mine. Their deck kind of looks down over me, so it's a way to even give me some privacy.
Sure. Thank you. If I could just have you sign in there too, please. Yeah. Commissioners, any questions for the applicants? Thank you. If we need you, we'll call you back up. Thank you very much. Anyone else in attendance who would like to speak in favor of this agenda item? Or is there anyone in attendance that would like to speak opposed? Oh, sorry.
I have a question for City Manager. Yep. Is that 20 foot, is that part of a utility easement?
No, it's the building setback from the
Just the
rear
building
property
setback,
line. If
okay.
there were easements in there, they could be within that setback,
Okay.
conceivably.
Once again, anyone opposed to this agenda item, please come forward. Seeing none, at this time I'll close the public hearing and I will bring it to the commissioners for a motion. Motion, please, commissioners.
I would like to make a motion to grant the variance based on the neighbor's letter stating they had no problem with this deck encroaching that 4 feet. It appears there's a garden shed that encroaches much closer to the property line in that same yard area. At this point, if there was somebody who would be opposed to it close by, I could see where we would deny it. It just doesn't make sense at this point with her enjoyment of her property and her backyard, and we're arguing over 4 feet. It just makes sense to let her enjoy that and continue.
Okay. I have a motion from Keller to approve.
I'll second it.
A second from Severson. Any discussion? I guess I would have a question for the city attorney. With a variance, would there need to be a form of a hardship in order for him to make a motion to approve a variance?
Mr. Chairman, the city ordinance on this issue requires that the granting of a variance be considered with a hardship, and the hardships that are defined in the code include exceptional shallowness or shape of the property, topographical conditions, extraordinary or exceptional circumstances or conditions on the property, which can include exceptional practical difficulties, unreasonable hardships due to something that the landowner, something unique to the property not created by the landowner, or property rights enjoyed by others. It also requires the commission to find that it can be granted without detriment to the public good and without impairing the intent of the code.
Thank you.
So the narrowness of the backyard could be considered a hardship for the use of that backyard at this point.
Okay. Do we have to have an amended motion for that? Or no? Okay. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
What would have happened if he'd built the deck the exact same size that it was? Would he even need to have a permit at all? And he would be encroaching more than he is now.
Yeah, it's new construction.
Well, yeah, it was,
That's gonna look
there's no record of a variance or anything that we could find as to how the original deck was built. But when it came down, then, you know, it's non-conforming, so it came down and it should technically be replaced to be in conformance with the code.
Any further discussion? Okay, please call the roll. Did somebody have something? Sorry. Oh, okay, sorry. Call the roll.
Offerdahl,
Yes.
Severson,
Yes?
Wagonest,
Yes.
Wetzler,
No.
Barch,
No.
Bullinger,
No?
Demacus,
No.
Hanson,
No.
Hochhalter,
Yes.
Keller.
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry.
Mr. Chairman, it was 5-5, so that motion fails.
Okay, that motion fails, and I do need another motion then. Commissioners, I will need another motion, please.
I'll make a motion to deny request.
Have a motion to deny. Wetzler?
Second.
Second by Barch. Any further discussion on this motion? Okay, please call the roll.
Who was the first and second on the second?
It was Wetzler and made the motion, and then Barch second.
Okay. Barch,
Yes.
Bullinger,
Yes.
Demacus,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Hochhalter, no? Keller,
No.
Offerdahl,
No.
Severson,
No.
Wagonast,
No.
and Wetzler.
Yes.
Five again.
Yeah, no action.
So no action at this time? Or do we call for another motion?
Mr. Chairman, if there could be a motion that, if there can be another motion, but otherwise we would just move on.
Okay.
So what does that mean?
There's no action by the planning commission. I think there is a section on that. It can go to the city council, if I recall.
Not a variance,
I don't know if that's in this section. I guess the item would, it fails because there's no, you have to have 7 approved to have the variance pass, so it would, the item is not approved. But the motion, the item fails, yep.
All right, the item fails, and we move on to our next item.
Get the chainsaw.
Agenda item number 5, which is a public hearing on a request by David Mayer for zone change to make land current with comprehensive plan for future developments. A zone change request is from Ag to R2, and this property is located at 1425 18th Street Southwest. If I can get city staff's recommendations, please.
Yes, sir. This is a vicinity map. You may be familiar with this property. It's in the Cook Drive area, just north of 14th Avenue. This is the old farmstead in the area. It's about a 4.5 acre tract, and the house is not livable at this time. Staff has met with the owner several times to talk about development potential. At one point, at the beginning, I guess a cul-de-sac was contemplated to come in off of 18th, and then maybe 5 or so lots platted for single family, but the owner felt like that maybe wouldn't cash flow, and so we had some other meetings. So more recently, the owner decided that the first thing that needs to happen in any case is to rezone this because it's zoned ag. It's only 4 acres and it can't stay that way and be developed as anything. So the developer is interested in the, you'll see there's some townhouses to the east of it, kind of interested in something similar to that. I'm going to zoom in here, show you a bigger picture of the property. Something similar to that, and so requested zoning from ag to R2. But the comprehensive plan actually shows this as medium density residential, so R2 or...
Commissioners, any questions for the principal planner? At this time, I'd ask anybody in attendance that would like to come forward and speak in favor of this agenda item to please come forward. Anyone opposed to this agenda item? Once again, anyone opposed to this agenda item to please come forward now. Seeing none, I will close the public portion of this hearing and turn it over to the commissioners for a motion, please.
Motion to approve. Second.
I got a motion to approve from Wagonist and a second from Demacus. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Wetzler,
Yes.
Barch,
Yes.
Bullinger,
Yes.
Demacus,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Hochhalter,
Yes.
Keller,
Yes.
Offerdahl,
Yes.
Severson,
Yes.
Wagonast.
Yes.
Motion carries. The next agenda item is to consider an amendment to conditional use permit established in March of 2018, resolution number 3585, to clarify that open sales rental lots for motor vehicles, manufactured homes, and recreational vehicles is allowable under the terms of the amended permit for all of the property occupied by the business because of a principal structure is associated with the business, and to change the legal description of for the permit to Hanover subdivision lots 1 and 2. Turned over to city staff for comments, please.
Yes, sir. This is kind of a housekeeping issue. This has to do with the Valley Sports and Marine site that suffered through the fire last summer, unfortunately, and has been working on rebuilding this site. And if you've been by there, you'll see there's a great, nice-looking building up there, and getting close to, within weeks, I would think, of maybe closing this out. But we found an issue that needs to be addressed with the conditional use permit that was issued back in March because of the requirements in conditional in the code, where this establishment had been here for a long time. I don't even know when it was originally located there. At that time, there wasn't a CUP required, but then when it burned down and became a new project, basically, they had to get a CUP for the outdoor display of these boats and RVs and things. And so in March, they went through the process, and that happened, and they got the CUP issued. And in the meantime, the owner decided to subdivide the property into 2 lots, Hanover subdivision lots 1 and 2. And I don't know if I have, yeah, this is the subdivision plat. And that caused an issue because part of the conditional use permit requirements that would allow for sales on an open sales lot require that any lot that conduct those sales have a principal building on the lot. So by doing this, there's a principal building on lot 1, the new building that's being constructed, and there's also, I think this other one that's shown here is also remaining, but there's no buildings on lot 2, so technically there's a violation of the code there. And staff did some brainstorming to try to figure out how to address that, and in the end, you may recall, an amendment to the code in C2 was put together by the steering committee where when there's more than one lot that has open sales and the lots are contiguous and under the same ownership and used for the same business, then that principal building can be on one of the lots, and the ability to use the other lots for open sales is okay because of the contiguous nature and the common ownership of that. And so that passed, and also the subdivision plat you see before you passed, but then the original conditional use permit was no longer valid because it was issued before the code change and also for a different legal description that was based on outlots, and now it's based on Hanover subdivision. So in a way, this is kind of a housekeeping issue to bring this conditional use permit back to where it needs to be as an amended permit, but the code says that an amended permit shall be treated as a new application. And so with that in mind, and with the advice of the city attorney, we told the owner we have to run this back through planning commission and council. At one time, we thought maybe we could just run it through on consent at council and make some changes, but that's not the case. So before you today is an amended, well, I guess it's in your packet, actually, not here, but there's some amended language to bring this up to snuff and have it reflect Hanover lots 1 and 2. There were also 3 conditions that were included in the original conditional use permit, one for erosion and sediment control, one for storm water management, and one for landscaping. And we just went ahead and repeated those again in the amended version just to make sure that those bases were covered. So that's the story with this one. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Commissioners, any questions for Principal Planner? Seeing none at this time, I'd like to ask anybody, members of the audience in attendance who would like to speak in favor of this agenda item to come forward. Or any of those opposed to please come forward. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing portion of this agenda item and ask the commissioners for a motion, please.
Move to approve based on staff findings and recommendations.
Motion by Demakis, second by Offerdahl. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Hanson,
Yes.
Hochhalter,
Yes.
Keller,
Yes.
Offerdahl,
Yes.
Severson,
Yes.
Wagonass,
Yes.
Wetzler,
Yes.
Barch,
Yes.
Bollinger,
Yes.
and Demakis.
Yes.
Motion carries. And our final item in other business today, we have, which is a public hearing to adopt changes amending zoning ordinance chapters 2, definitions, section 2-1, definitions, and chapter 16P or public zone in its entirety, and chapter 30 administrative procedures, section 30-5, text amendments and zoning district changes. I'll turn it over for a description from city staff, please.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You may recall a couple of months ago, there was a rezoning and subdivision that came through the commission for the Family Recreation Edition out in northwest Minot, and it's supposed to be the home of a new golf course and some other recreational amenities, and that was recommended for approval by commission. But when it got to council, the city council had some concerns with the way that the ordinance is written in terms of rezoning and the public zone, and asked that the zoning be remanded back to the planning commission at some future date. And in the meantime, for the zoning steering committee to look at these chapters of the code to try to bring what's in the code in line with the way that land development process actually occurs in the city of Minot. And so I'll do my best to explain this. So the first chapter that we looked at is chapter 30-5, which is the text, it's administrative procedures, but the section is for zoning district changes. And you may recall we've talked about this at certain points, and certainly the zoning committee has been aware of this for some time, and there's a discrepancy that needs to be fixed. And what it is, there's a kind of a laundry list in there of 11 items that are required at the time an application for rezoning comes in that staff and the zoning ordinance steering committee feel are inappropriate and premature, I guess, at that time in the land development process, because the requirements are so detailed, I guess, so strict and detailed. As for example, a site plan that shows the building and the layout of the site with all the parking and all the landscaping, all the drainage, stormwater management, including calculations. That's quite a bit to ask of a rezoning application when the owner may not know for sure what they even want to build. A lot of times in Minot, developers do a speculative type of rezoning where they find a piece of property that perhaps it's on Broadway on the edge of town and it's got great access, and this could be a really good commercial site, but it's not zoned yet. So they're going to run the flag up the pole and see if it can be rezoned to C2. And what this chapter is saying then is that they have to hire a consultant to put together plans and show all of these detailed items. And I don't know what that costs, but I would imagine several $1,000s without even knowing if the zoning will be approved, and perhaps not even knowing what they're going to build on the site, because there are a lot of different uses that are, for example, in C2, they're allowed. You could build a bank in C2, you could build a restaurant, you could build a motel, you could build a gas station. And so a lot of times the developers would like to get the C2 zoning and then have other interested parties come to them and say, you know, we're restaurant developers, we'd like to develop a restaurant. Okay, well, we can split a lot off and do that, or we're a bank, or we're a motel chain. And so it seems onerous and cost prohibitive or kind of a waste of money to require that level of detail early in the process. You have to understand all that happens later, because the engineering department's not going to let development go through without stormwater management calculations, and the planning department's not going to let it go through without a landscape plan, et cetera, et cetera. So there's checks and balances in the process. And so when I say we're trying to amend the code to bring it in more in line with how the development actually works in Minot, that's what I'm referring to, that all these items that are in there are met at some point in the process, but it doesn't make sense to do it early in the process. There may be perhaps franchise developments like another McDonald's or a Red Lobster or Bed Bath & Beyond, that they build these things all over the country, so they might be able to bring in a lot of information right up front and say, here's our prototype, here's how we do our parking, here's how we do this or that. And that's great, and if they can provide that, then the more the merrier, but I think it's over the top to ask for that kind of detail on every application. And so the language that we constructed at the steering committee is that the developer should put together an intent of a vision of development for the property. So if they have that kind of information from McDonald's or whoever, that's great. If not, then maybe a statement of the intent is to zone this for commercial purposes and compliance with C2 zoning regulations. All those regulations will be met. The use types we're contemplating are A, B, and C, a strip mall with some outlaws, maybe a bank, maybe a restaurant, whatever the vision is. But that they shouldn't be held to that, and if things change later, then that would be an okay thing. So we basically changed the language to, I think there's still information that we would like to see with the rezoning application, and so the steering committee basically changed that language to require a location map, which was one of the items. That's good, and also an aerial photograph showing the site. That could be helpful. The zoning of the parcel and all the adjacent parcels, this is a rezoning request, and we want it to fit, right? The land use designation from the city's future land use plan for the property and all adjacent properties. And instead of a site plan, perhaps a boundary survey of the site that shows the property lines and any improvements. Are there wetlands, are there woodlands, are there water courses, or other natural features? Staff might request contour lines if it's a steep site, that kind of thing. Are there any buildings on the site? Are there setbacks that need to be adhered to? Any easements of record that have to be honored that would affect future development and the zoning potential for the site, or any other types of encumbrances? And then the final thing is what I already said about, at a minimum, a written description of the applicant's intent and vision for the development of the property shall be provided. If known, a conceptual layout of the site depicting proposed improvements, including but not limited to all the things, buildings, parking, access points, etc., can be submitted, but it's not required that they go to that level of detail. Applicants are encouraged to submit additional information that may further describe the applicant's request. So that is Chapter 30-5. You have a marked up, strikeout underlined version and also a clean version of how it would be after the changes. One thing that came out of that discussion was that there's no description in the definitions of what a boundary survey is. And so another part of this amendment is to amend Chapter 2 definitions to add a definition for the term boundary survey, which we got from a surveying corporation. Ackerman Esfold worked with us on that. The map, plat, or statement of the results of a survey by which a parcel of land is measured on the ground and the courses and distances of its boundaries, area, and contents are ascertained. So we'd like to add that into the definitions chapter. And moving on to Chapter 16, we looked at this chapter in its entirety. This is the public zone. So any city projects or Minot Park, there may be other governmental agencies, I don't know, but primarily city and parks. This would be the zoning that would be for public. And again, a lot of the information that's requested in Chapter 16 is premature, given the way that we develop land here, asking for finished stormwater calculations when all that, that we're looking at may be preliminary. I'll take you back to the Family Recreation Edition. You may recall that there was a diagram that showed the golf course, and it showed the clubhouse and the parking and the driving range, and it showed a recreation area in the southwest part of the site with trails and playgrounds. But is that exactly what's going to get built? No, because they don't know what the funding, it's a multi-year thing, and they're looking for funding opportunities, and they got an idea for this clubhouse, maybe the funds aren't there, it's got to be smaller, then the parking lot's smaller. And so it's a fluid kind of exercise, although the diagram does show some important information. It shows access points, it shows general locations of where the clubhouse might be, drainage of the site, it shows potential locations for detention ponds, circulation through the site, some of those things. And the details are reserved for later. When the clubhouse is funded and it comes forward, then a building permit application is applied for. We have to hammer out the landscaping and the construction details and all the stuff that any other private project would have to do. Also, with the public zone, the way it's currently written, the language asks for any new project or any change in use or any addition to a public facility that come to the Planning Commission for a special public hearing to explain the project in all kinds of detail. And what the steering committee came up with is to follow more, and I think there may have been some cases in the past, or at least some suspicion that because this is a public project, the city doesn't have to do all the same things, or the Minot Parks District doesn't have to do all the same thing a private developer has to do. And we're going to get off the hook on some of these things. And certainly I think the city or the Parks District or any of the public projects need to be held to the same standard as any private development, but we shouldn't be held to any higher standard. It's a level playing field, if you will. So looking at the way private projects come through the process, we've developed this process called Development Review Team, where the applicants come and meet and discuss what they'd like to do, any issues with utilities, with building questions, with zoning, with transportation, stormwater, all that can be discussed at DRT. And because DRT is a staff-populated review board, and these might be city projects, in order to, again, be overboard, I guess, and above board, we suggested with the steering committee that the mayor appoint one planning commissioner and one council member to sit in on those DRTs, just so it's not the staff behind closed doors working on a staff project, so to speak. And then after it goes to DRT, it would come forward to the Planning Commission and on the council. Right now, Chapter 16 just calls for a public hearing at Planning Commission and then go on to council for a second public hearing. So actually a little bit more public perusal. But instead of the amount of detail at the forefront, we're requesting that that's a good summary of Chapter 16. Are there any questions that you have that I might be able to answer?
Thank you, Mr. Planner. Any questions from the commissioners for the principal planner?
I got one, Mr. Lang.
Yes, sir.
With all the revisions and a lot of stuff's excluded not to be on the front, is all this stuff addressed later on somewhere now? In another, down the road, because you had to have the drainage?
Right.
That is addressed somewhere else?
Exactly. As you know, a lot of times the private development projects that come through here, the conditions will say they have to have a stormwater management plan that's approved by engineering. They have to have erosion and sediment control approved by engineering. Sometimes a traffic study is required. So depending on the scope of the project as it evolves, then those checks and balances are in place much in the same way that we look at private development projects, that we would uphold the public projects to meet the same standard.
Commissioners, any other questions at this time? Is there anybody in attendance who would like to speak in favor of? Please come forward. Raleigh.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Raleigh Ackerman. I'm a member of the steering committee. First of all, I'd like to just offer a quick amendment. I just noticed this tonight when I was sitting here. If you go to chapter 30, 30.5, it'll be on paragraph number 4. And it'll be the second sentence. And what I'd like to have you do is consider this amendment. Other information such as locations of, strike the word proposed. And then it should just read other information such as locations of wetlands, existing woodlands, water courses, or other natural features present on the site shall be shown. So virtually it's not proposed, it's already there. So
Good catch.
just strike that word. In reference to the amendments that we're talking about, this has actually been going on for probably in excess of 3 to 4 years. This started back in when Dave Panko was chairman of the steering committee, and Donna Bai was the principal, or was the planner, director. And then, of course, then we went from Donna to Mr. Porter to, I never did meet the other one, the gal, and then, of course, Robert Davis. And during that whole time frame, I mean, the steering committee was kind of in limbo and not, but we had always talked about, particularly when it came to what was needed on the application when it concerned zoning, when we really didn't know anything what was going to go on there. I can tell you two circumstances that we were on, our company was on. One was on Skyport development that was up by the old Reliastar or the clinic, St. A's Clinic up in North Minot by Players Park. Mr. Feist had to submit a full plan showing elevations on something that it was a church and a daycare that was planning on going in there. And he had to submit full drawings, and then the deal fell through. The church backed out of it, and they had all this investment in something that wasn't necessary or not, probably not. The other circumstance was just east of Trinity, where they're building their existing hospital, the piece that Sanford bought. We had a client there that was looking at a box store, and we submitted all sorts of different drawings, not knowing what type of box store was going to go in there, but the developer he wanted to purchase this property. That was another thing. That deal fell through because of all the wetlands and the amount of work that it would take during the process, the due diligence process. So to do what you're considering, I certainly approve of what you're doing or considering. The committee, the steering committee certainly is behind it, and it's something that should have been done a while back. So if there's anything that I can ask or answer, I'd be glad to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Ackerman. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Ackerman this time? Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
Anyone else in attendance that would like to speak in favor of or either opposed to this agenda item? Please come forward now. Seeing no more, we'll close the public hearing, and I will ask the commissioners for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve as presented with one addendum to 30-5, paragraph 4, striking the word proposed.
Motion by Wignest.
Second.
Second by Sievertson. Any further discussion? Okay, please call the roll.
Wetzler,
Yes.
Bartsch,
Yes.
Bollinger,
Yes.
Demakis,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Falter,
Yes.
Keller,
Yes.
Offerdahl,
Yes.
Severson,
Yes.
Wagonest.
Yes.
Motion carries. And this meeting is adjourned.